Good morning. I'm Leonard Spider Montut, PRO of the United Workers' Party, and I'm here this morning to speak on the crime situation as exists in St. Lucia today that the government seems to be oblivious of. And I just want to point out to St. Lucians that in the last 2.5 years, we have seen some 200 St. Lucians perish as a result of violent crime. And I speak here particularly of homicides. That does not mean that there are not many other crimes taking place in this country that are affecting the lives of St. Lucians. But the ultimate is the loss of life. And we have in our country several government ministers with portfolios that are designated to dealing with crime, yet still the crime situation has gone unabated, and we hear absolutely nothing from the individuals who are supposed to be responsible for dealing and curbing crime in St. Lucia. And so what do we have currently? We have a situation where so far, in the month of August, we already have some 52 St. Lucians who have perished as a result of crime. We have not heard a word from the Minister of National Security on many of those incidents. We have not heard a word from the Minister of Crime Prevention. We have not heard a word from the Minister of Home Affairs. And of course, the Attorney General may want to weigh in on what is going on in our country today. I call on the government to stop behaving as if crime is not their business. It is a concern. It has grown to crisis proportion in St. Lucia, and something drastic has to be done for the abatement of the crime situation as exists here, especially given the increasing number of homicides. We cannot continue to treat the lives of our citizens as mere statistics. I want to ask the government to put the same energy and effort into the crime-fighting effort as they do with the political agenda. The government has a mantra of preserving, or rather protecting, the victory. And that is based solely on preserving their cushy jobs. That is based solely on preserving the salaries that they get. That is based solely on keeping them in power. What about protecting the lives and livelihoods of St. Lucia? And I say lives and livelihood. That's a term that you heard during COVID, because COVID was a crisis, a pandemic that affected St. Lucians and didn't only take away the lives of St. Lucians, but also threatened the livelihoods of St. Lucian. The crime situation is doing exactly the same. Our main industry in St. Lucia is tourism. And if we are to keep our economy buoyant and booming, we have to preserve the tourist industry. It has been defined as a fickle industry, and we know how easily we can get one of the countries from which our tourists come, like the United States of America, the UK, and even France, to issue advisories to tell their citizens not to come to St. Lucia because St. Lucia is dangerous. Is that what we are waiting for? We have to treat crime as seriously as we treated COVID, because it threatens our lives and it threatens our livelihood. And so I call on the government to give due recognition to the fact that we are in crisis as far as crime is concerned in this country. I want to invoke the name Kentrell Joseph, because the reason why I'm doing so, it is because many say that we should let the criminals kill the criminals. And it appears to me that that seems to be the thinking of the government as well. But there's danger in that kind of thinking, because when this happens, the situation in terms of law and order goes out of control, and it spills over beyond the gang members and into the wider society. And so I mentioned the name Kentrell Joseph, a 2-year-old of Beaufort who lost his life last year. Was he a gang member? Yes, it may have been perpetrated by members of gangs, but that demonstrates that the crime situation has spilled over into the wider community where none of us are safe anymore. I also want to invoke the name Eric Melchizedek Tixi, a young man, okay, in his early adolescence, 13 years old of Deriso, who was gunned down in his parents' home. The door of their home was kicked down, and he was shot right inside of his home, which is supposed to be his sanctuary, which is supposed to be his place of refuge, in the presence of his parents and siblings. Was he a gang member? We heard only days ago that an ex-police officer, a trained person, was stripped of his firearm and shot. Was he a gang member? And if a trained police officer is not safe on the streets of St. Lucia, are we? So, my question is the government waiting for an official of the government or one high-ranking member of their party to be a victim for them to spring into action? It is the responsibility of the government to demonstrate to us that they are cognizant of the situation, and they are taking the situation seriously, and they are prepared to do something about it. When you are in a position of leadership, you ought to lead. When you have responsibility, you have to act responsibly. And I do not see that happening with the government, and crime seems to go on unabated. Homicides seem to be commonplace in St. Lucia to the extent that the government does not even think that our lives matter enough for them to even make a comment. We go sometimes with weekends where several homicides take place, and not a word, like Rick would say, not a word, not a word, not a word from any government official charged with the responsibility of crime reduction. And so we have gotten to the juncture where we as citizens must take it more seriously, because our lives are in jeopardy, and must demand of the government that they come out and make a definitive statement as to what exactly they are doing in the crime reduction effort, what exactly they're doing to protect our lives, because I keep reminding them that one of the primary responsibilities of any government is the safety and security of its people. So, instead of employing people to protect their victory, they should take on their responsibility to protect our lives, protect our economy, keep our people safe. That should be what comes first to the government, not preserving the high offices and not preserving their cushy salaries. And so we have come to the juncture where we are well on path, well on course to setting a new record once again in terms of the number of homicides. And you have a prime minister who said he was the most ready to govern this country, who holds the portfolio of national security. But under his watch, we have seen a sharp and rapid increase in homicides in this country, to the extent that we have 2 consecutive years of record setting, and we are on course once again to even surpass that record. This is not the notoriety we want for our country. This is not where we want to set records. Our Prime Minister should ensure that he give us the comfort and assurance that we will not have another record-setting year in homicides once again. And so, St. Lucians, it is all our business, because we are all in danger. And if the government does not realize it, we ought to make them realize it. And so I am awaiting a response from the Prime Minister, who is the Minister of National Security. I'm awaiting word from the Minister of Crime Prevention, and I don't know what crime he is preventing, but we seem to see that there's allegations of crime even in cabinet now, let alone preventing crime within the wider society. And so they have to come out and justify the salary that they are earning. They have to come out now and justify the fact that they were handed that mandate and given that responsibility. They have to show that they are up to the task, and they have to justify their place for the position that they hold. I thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I grow more and more wary every day as to some of the things that are being said, whether in fact we all genuinely really understand them, whether in fact we are using the same language sometimes. And I don't blame St. Lucians, I blame myself, and I blame members of my party sometimes. And maybe we use terms thinking that everybody really appreciates what we're saying. So I want to start off today by using the dictionary's definition of a con artist. So we use the term, and I think that if I was to ask people, there would be many multiple definitions, sadly, of what a con artist is. So maybe if we can, hopefully this morning at least, and the persons who are listening, we can all agree on what the definition of a con artist is. A con artist is a person who cheats or tricks others by persuading them to believe something that is not true. A person who cheats or tricks others by persuading them to believe something that is not true. So I say that today because we saw a master class yesterday at the Chamber's luncheon by the Minister of Investment and particularly CIP, a master class of the art of conning. I can say that because he took advantage of a lot of people in St. Lucia who, for whatever reason, have not delved into the CIP program and how it works. And I say he took advantage of that because he skirted many of the factual issues and presented them in a way to convey to the people of St. Lucia, as has become typical of the Labour Party, we're good people. We're doing things right. And that any problems that we have in St. Lucia is either somebody from the outside of St. Lucia's fault or the opposition. And sometimes I think that they forget that is the government, that they've actually been in government for 3 years. And while some of those excuses may be applicable in your first year, even possibly, but unacceptably in your second year, those excuses are not applicable and don't qualify in your third year. So let me start maybe with a little bit of history, because they say that a person never really changes his colors. I think this saying is a zebra never changes his stripes. So there was a case in St. Lucia. So let me just say this, that one of the aspersions that was casted yesterday, and it's something that I see recently that the government is going to, their talking point. And the talking point on the CIP is not to answer any of the specific questions, but to somehow say that there is some kind of collusion with the United Workers' Party, Alan Shastney in particular, and Mr. Martinez. And that the purpose of that unification is to damage the reputation of St. Lucia. More importantly, that the allegation is that me in particular, I want to cause irreparable damage to our correspondent banking, meaning to prevent St. Lucians from financially interacting with the rest of the world, and that we are attempting to cause countries to take away the visa access for St. Lucians. I want to say that, and what I said at the meeting yesterday, is Mr. Martinez nor Alan Shastney are involved in Dominica. Never heard me speak on Dominica. I don't think you've heard Mr. Martinez speak on Dominica. Yet, Dominica has lost its corresponding bank's relationship with the Bank of America as it pertains specifically to CIP funds. It means that no bank in Dominica can receive CIP funds and bring them into Dominica, and vice versa. Any monies that are associated to the CIP program are prohibited from going through the banking system. Was it Alan Shastney and Mr. Martinez that made that happen? Or is it the actions of the government in Dominica that caused that to happen? The British government and Ireland have suspended visa-free access for Dominicans. Is it Alan Shastney and Mr. Martinez that caused that to happen? Or is it the actions of the government of Dominica that came after the audit of the British government to find out that the government of Dominica had lied about how many passports were issued and had lied about their due diligence process? And then the government of Dominica 2 weeks ago suddenly announced the revocation. The revocation means they took away 68 passports of people who had applied for citizenship under the allegation that the persons had not paid the right amount of money. Mr. Martinez has his own agenda. The opposition in St. Lucia, we have our own agenda. Our agenda is to protect the integrity of St. Lucians. And like we warned the government about the cost of living, like we've warned the government about what's taking place in healthcare, like we've warned the government what's taking place in the security system, and like we have warned the government what's taking place with CIP. It's not today that we've told them that they're going down a path that is going to jeopardize our corresponding bank relationship, meaning our ability to transact financial businesses outside of St. Lucia, and it's going to have an impact on our visa-free regime. We've said that the Europeans now have passed a law that has now given the Commission, the European Commission, the unilateral decision. What is a unilateral decision? The sole decision. They don't have to, the discretionary decision. They don't have to ask any permission. That any country that has a CIP program, and if the Commission believes that that country is doing things that could possibly jeopardize the security of their country, they can suspend the Schengen visa regime. We are repeatedly on record to say that the suspension of the Schengen visa has significant implications for the average St. Lucian, because it will also impact our access to Martinique. Not only to visit family and friends, not only to go to shopping, but more importantly, access to health care. That's not the United Workers' Party's doing. We don't control Parliament. We're only pointing out what the facts are and how those actions could potentially expose St. Lucia. In the case of Mr. Martinez, he has pointed out not only to St. Lucia, but to St. Kitts, that in his estimation, that Galaxy has duped the citizens of St. Kitts, and that he sees in the infrastructure program in St. Lucia the exact same thing. So he's on his own agenda. And his agenda is to say to us all that this is how they're duping you. And he's offered the government of St. Kitts and the government of St. Lucia to come to Washington, or for him to come down to St. Lucia, either way, for him to present the facts to show you how you're being duped. And very importantly, he's saying to all of us that he does not believe that St. Kitts citizens will be able to recover the money that Galaxy's taken. So he says the only way that you can recover money is by two processes. One is to do an audit and determine if those persons who were given citizenship paid the right amount of money. And if they did not pay the right amount of money, that the state, before issuing the passport, the citizenship, should require them to pay the difference, so that at least the state can recover that portion of the money. And if you've already issued the passport, is to say to the persons, if they don't pay the remaining amount of money, that you will suspend their passport. I don't see what's so egregious about what he's saying. The second thing he said is the money that Galaxy has already collected. In his estimation and in looking at the bank accounts that he's obtained, the transactions he's obtained from the US banks, that money is gone. And so to recover that money from Galaxy will be virtually impossible. So he feels that the only thing that the country and him, because he does not want to receive money, and he's made that clear, he does not want the taxpayers of St. Kitts to pay the money. He wants the persons who benefited unlawfully from the CIP program for them to pay. And so he said the only way that in his mind that he can, and he's asked us to join him, is in a class action suit against some of the banks that facilitated this unlawful act. He's saying that he will do it, but the case would be substantially strengthened if, in fact, that the countries also acknowledge that they have been duped. So, when your government and your ministers go to extreme lengths to try to convince us that Martinez is what? A fraudster? Martinez is this, Martinez is that these are things that have taken place in the private sector. These are private sector people working with each other, and we should not take all that stuff into account. That's the argument? Now, I'm hoping that St. Lucians don't have a short memory. But just in case some do, I've dug up and unearthed an example of where déjà vu. Déjà vu means, here we go again. History is repeating itself. Okay? We've seen this before. And I speak specifically about the Jufali case, where a Saudi billionaire worth $4 billion was given a diplomatic passport here in St. Lucia to represent us at the IMO. And so there were several articles that were written. So let me just take one that we know. So we have articles from the Independent newspaper, we have from the Daily Mail, we have from U.S. papers, all who covered this case. So the article says, on Tuesday, the legal editor of the London Times, Francis Gibb, tongued seemingly firmly planted in cheek, wrote the following under the banner, "No immunity for Sheikh in £4 billion divorce for model." So that's the headlines. Look at the headlines. Saudi billionaires secured diplomatic posting in St. Lucia to avoid divorce suit. Okay, that's what the headlines were. That's what people were saying about St. Lucia. He went on and said, he may never have attended meetings of the International Maritime Organization as the island's representative, but the post was most certainly not acquired to secure diplomatic immunity. That's what his claim was. So the Telegraph chief of the foreign correspondent, Mr. David Blair, reported the case this way. Christina Estrade, the former Perlili calendar model, won a victory over the Saudi billionaire ex-husband in the court on Monday, allowing her to lay claim to the share of his property portfolio in Britain. A judge ruled that Walid Jafali, who divorced Ms. Estrada in 2014, had sought to defeat her action by asserting a spurious legal immunity based on his appointment as the Caribbean diplomat in London. The judge noted there was no evidence that Mr. Jafali had any knowledge or experience of maritime matters, seaborne trade, shipping, or indeed any of the specialized areas with which the IMO is concerned. Mr. Justice Hayden ruled that Mr. Jafali's sole intention for securing this position was to defeat Ms. Estrada's claims consequent on the breakdown of his marriage. The judge concluded that Mr. Jafali had not, in any real sense, taken up his appointment, and that the Saudis' diplomatic standards amounted in an entirely artificial construct. Meaning it was fake. It was a con. Remember what I said a con is? Let me read it again for you. A person who cheats or tricks others by persuading them to believe something that is not true. So what happened here? Jafali, being supported by the government of St. Lucia, pretended to be a diplomat. We know he was not because he never went to the meetings. He never had any training in the maritime field. So they conned us. The Guardian said, a billionaire's plea for diplomatic immunity exploited to avoid his former wife's claim for maintenance has been branded as spurious and struck down by the High Court. The businessman said he acquired diplomatic status when he was appointed a permanent representative of the International Maritime Organization. That her ex-husband's diplomatic position was merely a flag of convenience, and the tycoon had never attended a meeting of the IMO. Every article, every description, and I'll use the word of the judge, a sham. So when the Labour Party wants to come back and make allegations of who is damaging the reputation of St. Lucia, history has already told us. History is repeating itself all over again. Now, what is very important is that on 2 occasions, the then Labour Party government was approached. The first one was by the lawyers of Ms. Estrada directly, and said, look, if he's your ambassador, do not allow him to use his immunity to avoid answering for my case. The government of St. Lucia said, no, this is listen to the words, a private matter between private people, and that the government does not get involved in those things. Now, it has been commonplace for many countries that when they have diplomats dealing with civil cases in the country, that their immunity is dropped. The immunity for diplomats are put in place so that the host country cannot intimidate a diplomat from attending a meeting, cannot intimidate a diplomat from conducting the business of the state. Because let's face it, that sometimes there are countries that are attending these meetings that are not necessarily friendly to the host country, but the host country, in agreeing to have that international organization there, has to sign and give them immunity from those kinds of things. But the immunity was never designed to deal with your own personal things. But I want us to listen to the words. That the state is not going to get involved in private matters. Now, I can understand the government of St. Lucia saying, look, I don't want to get involved in private matters. But then, shortly afterwards, the British government asked that immunity be given, that immunity be waived, and explained to them why. And once again, the state said, no, they're not going to get involved in those private matters. I say that because the déjà vu, history repeating itself. What is it we hear as the excuse from this government about CIP? Martinez, like Mrs. Estrada, they said Mrs. Estrada was a gold digger and going after her husband's money. So she became, the messenger became the enemy. We're seeing the exact same thing repeat itself again with Martinez. That Martinez is coming from the outside and saying, hey, these are the things that are going on. Come and get the facts, just like what Estrada, the lawyer, said to do. And again, what have we seen? The same exact mongrel behavior that we saw before, which was to ignore the facts and to a person who cheats or tricks others by persuading them to believe something that is not true. That's what happened. And so the judge found that Mr. Jufali did not qualify for immunity in this case and favored the lady. Now, I'm hoping that we, as St. Lucians, would have learned. And what is it we're supposed to have learned? That in the Jufali case, the facts were there before us. I remember specifically when Hilaire was on Timothy Pollion's show as the High Commissioner, and he was asked if in fact Jufali had a diplomatic passport. And he said, well, I'm not the one who gives the passports, so I wouldn't know that. And Tim said to him, but this has been ongoing. Obviously by now you would be able to know if he has a diplomatic passport. And he refused to answer the question. So yesterday, when I was at the chamber meeting, déjà vu, history all over again. That the fundamental question that the minister should have answered at the meeting yesterday, why has the chairman resigned or not resigned? What's the truth of CIP? Is it a fact that your CEO went to Washington, D.C.? Is it a fact that he told Mr. Martinez that there was 6,000 files or 6,000 families that were given to Galaxy for the hotel? And was there 7,000 families approved for the infrastructure program? He was supposed to explain to everybody, why is it that even though it is in the act of the CIP Act that the unit is supposed to provide an annual report accompanied by audited report every year. And if you go online, you'll see that while we were in office, that every year it was done. All the reports and the audit reports are there. How is it for 3 years you have not been able to provide a report? How is it that the Economic Fund also requires an annual report and audited financials? That has never happened. The minister was supposed to answer the question. The $100 million US specifically for infrastructure, where's the money? Where's the money? Galaxy put out a press statement to say that they're collecting the money and they're also collecting the fees. It's not going into an escrow account. We expected him to confirm or deny and provide information to say and to make everybody comfortable. No answer. Instead, the minister played politics. The minister brought up range. The minister brought up an unbelievable example. You know, I think there's a video going around of a Rastaman giving his take on the CIP. And I think that he was reacting to when the same minister said that the money that goes into the real estate program doesn't belong to us. It's their money. And I think the Rastaman put it and said, wait a second. The citizenship belongs to us. So you're telling me that you entered into a deal in which you gave the citizenship to somebody and have allowed them to take the money, and you want to come and tell me that that's a good idea? And I think that he put it in very good terms. Imagine you having an asset. You're giving a man to go and sell the asset. The man sells the asset, takes the money, and tells you he doesn't owe you anything. I mean, brilliant. So even though the money belongs to Galaxy, it goes into an escrow account to make sure that there's accountability on how the money is spent, because they were given those citizenships to build a hotel. The minister offered no explanation. Why would you now go from 700 files to 6,000 files? So you're going to get them collect, instead of $200 million, you're now going to let them collect $1.2 billion. So when people say, where's the money, Mr. Minister? They're saying, if the hotel only cost $400 million and you're allowing them to sell $1.2 billion, where's the $800 million? It doesn't make sense to anybody as to why you would do that. He didn't answer that question. He didn't, in fact, answer any of the questions. He said, listen to this, that the CIP program is like you being in real estate. You have a house that's worth $1 million, okay? You sell the house. You got to give a commission of 10% or 20%. Let's say it's 20%. So that means that the commission is $200,000. If you want, what you can do is cut back on your commission, and instead of selling the house for $1 million, you can sell the house for $900,000. And that's the excuse, that's the story that he gave us to justify the discounting that's taking place. So continuously, in the examples that this government gives, they're always admitting that they know that there is discounting taking place. So I want to tell the minister, if in fact he wants to minimize a very important fact of law. The house belongs to you. How much you want to sell the house for? Your discretion. There's nothing illegal about you discounting it. But in the case of the citizenship, the price that you have to sell the citizenship is by statute or is by law. It's unlawful. It's illegal to sell citizenship for less than the prescribed amount. And we are at pains to explain to this government, of which I know that they understand, but they are acting as con men, that when you do that and you obtain money unlawfully, and that money goes through the banking system, that, Mr. Minister, is what is going to affect our corresponding bank. It's not the United Workers' Party in Allen Shasta. It is your own actions that is going to cause the problem. Now, 5 Chinese persons have been arrested recently. I believe it's 2 in the United States, 1 in the UK, and 2 in Singapore. All the Chinese people have one thing in common, that they obtained citizenships in either St. Kitts or Dominica. In fact, 4 got from St. Kitts, and 1 of them got from Dominica. They've been arrested and charged with money laundering, with human trafficking, and with crypto conspiracies. Now, anybody who knows the Western world knows that those are probably the most frightening acts that you can commit, because it speaks to those countries' national security. And all of them, 4 of them got their passports through St. Kitts, and specifically got them through the Galaxy program. These are alarm bells. These are warnings. You already saw that Dominica lost their visa-free access. So when you are approving citizenships in a mass way and want to convince us that the due diligence is being done properly, I'm sorry. It's not there. The minister brought up range as if my government did something wrong. I want to remind the minister and remind all of us, the range deal was signed 6 days before the elections in June of 2016. So Parliament had already been prorogued. I'm not even so sure Cabinet was meeting, and the deal was signed. And I can pick up the phone now and call Mohammed. Not to confirm that, but to say that I've always had a very frank and honest relationship with with Mohammed. And I said to him, I said, Mohammed, I don't trust you. Because if you signed this deal 6 days before, how can I trust you? I said, but it doesn't mean I will not do business with you. But I just want you to know that every time I do business with you, I'm taking it from the perspective that I don't trust you. So instead of allowing him to do the real estate deal the way it is, where the money goes into an escrow account, we said to him, sell the money into our donation program. Why? We can touch the money. And that the money then was going to be transferred to Invest St. Lucia, and Invest St. Lucia would have lent them the money. So you would have gotten the hotel, and you would have been able to recover your money. So I want to be very, very clear. If this government continues going down the pathway that they're going with CIP, we all St. Lucians are going to pay the price. Our visa-free regime, which we've always had and was given to us because those countries trusted us, is in jeopardy. Our correspondent banking relationship is in trouble. And that there's only one set of persons that we can hold accountable for that, and that is the St. Lucia Labour Party, specifically the Prime Minister. And I say the Prime Minister because the Prime Minister appointed the Minister of CIP. The person who is the CEO, who ought to be fired already, is the campaign manager and good friend to the Prime Minister. That Lawrence Theophilus was put in as chairman because he is a personal friend to the Prime Minister. And let's not forget, the Prime Minister put his daughter in CIP. And guess what her title is? Risk Profile Analysis. Her job is to determine the risk of the persons. So don't come here at some point when all of this collapses and try to wash your hands, Mr. Prime Minister. The people of this country trusted you, made you the custodian of the sovereignty of this country. You are responsible for whatever happens inside CIP. And we've given you the advice. If the chairman has not resigned, he should be fired because he's been missing in action. The CEO, not even suspended, should be fired because he went to Washington, D.C. You say on his own. He says he had permission. Which one is it? And there have been words and statements ascribed to him which are damning, which have not been clarified. So either what he is saying is true, and you must accept it's true and remedy the problem, or he's lying and you need to fire him. Based on what I heard the minister say yesterday, the minister should be fired. Because the minister went to a civil society group, and instead of providing facts and clarity, he played politics and wants to blame everything on everybody else and take absolutely no accountability for what's taking place. The Prime Minister, I think, said that government is serious business, if I'm not mistaken. He said it's not a bingo. He said it's not a lotto. He said it's not a logo. I don't know what that means, but that's what he said. But it means to me that he understands that this is not something you take a chance with. And you are taking chances with the integrity of our state. You want to say that it's United Workers' Party that's going around and causing the country to be in disrepute? It's your government. Not only today, but in the past. I can go and speak about Greinberg. What did that do to the reputation of St. Lucia? You have a minister of government that every day is conning people in this country, and that's Richard Fedrick. You're the ones who went to Barbados and said that he was a money launderer and a drug trafficker. You're the ones who said he's not fit to be a minister. You're the ones who said he shouldn't have a diplomatic passport. And when the diplomatic passport was revoked, you're the first persons to say that he should not be in cabinet. You won the election with 13 seats. It means you had no reason to bring anybody into your cabinet. So what is the relationship that you have that is so compelling that you would bring a person of ill repute into your cabinet, and more importantly, into your ministry? And you are on record as saying that speculation is as bad as being guilty. Who is there more speculation about than Richard Fedrick? Who in this country? All of these matters tie together, that we have a government that is conning the people of this country. And remind you what conning means again. Let me say it again. A person or persons who cheat or trick others by persuading them to believe something that is not true. And that is happening to us in St. Lucia. And so there's one last matter I want to bring up, which relates to this, which is GPH, Global Ports Holding. I consider myself a relatively well-informed person. I consider myself intelligent, and I do not understand the details of the GPH deal. I don't know why the government of St. Lucia would give up almost $1.5 billion EC dollars of revenue to get nothing. So instead of collecting $5 million US dollars a year, they're now collecting $1 million. And what makes matters even worse is that it was shrouded and still remains shrouded in secrecy. In secrecy. I bring this up because last week, GPH publicly announced that they intend to go private. They want to come off of the stock exchange in England. And what's the excuse that they gave? Not my words. The words in the article. To preserve their secrecy. That there are things that they do not want the public to know that they're doing. And then yesterday, we've gotten no announcements from this government, you know. All we see is an SI, a statutory instrument, appear in a newspaper, waiving the stamp duty for GPH to transfer its shares from being a public company to a private company. This is the work of con artists. And we cannot continue to be gullible. There is absolutely no reasonable explanation as to why this GPH deal is good. And like the CIP program, the promise that it's going to help us is only in words, not in deeds. And I feel very sorry for St. Lucians who probably right now are being distracted because they are suffering, they're stifling on the sharp rise in the cost of living in this country. And instead of using this money to help offset the expenses, particularly the more vulnerable people in our society have, they're not. They're not subsidizing the electricity costs. They're not subsidizing the increase in the 2.5%. Instead, they waive the 2.5% for a businessman, one businessman, one business. So, people of St. Lucia, let me say it again. This is a government of con artists who have no intentions of doing anything to help our country. And I'm very concerned, I have to say to you, that the longer that this government stays in, the more damage that is going to happen. And I mean, we can speak about St. Jude's, we can speak about HIA, we can speak about national lotteries, we can speak about a multitude of things. But I specifically wanted to bring up CIP and say to all of us, we have a problem, we need to wake up, we need to go and research the information for ourselves and to understand that nobody knows where the money is going. And this government is deliberately doing that. And I want to know who exactly is benefiting.
Thank you very much, Leader of the Opposition. And if you do have any questions pertaining to the subjects that were presented today, that is crime and the CIP, you may please do so now.
Okay, so we're done. We're off here.
Yeah.
Okay. We're not taking questions on the clock. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
That's the new policy. So we just make the statements, and then the media actually will have the statement and can answer your questions.
Yeah. Okay. So we are going offline now. So we want to thank those of you who have been watching us via live stream. And we want to thank whether you're in St. Lucia or in the diaspora. And we ask you to join us again next week when we will have another presentation. But in the meantime, I want to remind you that on Thursday morning, we will be having meet the opposition on Rev Up. On Thursday evening, the round table as usual, and on Sunday, we will have Sunday Live with the United Workers' Party. So you can look forward to all of these. Thank you very much.